Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar launches a stinking attack on the Congress.
I try not to be loud. I try to get my narrative across in an elegant and effective way, maybe at times sharper than people may want.
A day later, the Congress fires back, calling Jaishankar a failed foreign minister and tears into the Narendra Modi government's China policy.
निजी झगड़ा नहीं है, मैं आपके ऊपर कोई निजी आक्षेप नहीं लगा रही हूं, लेकिन हां, मैं ये जरूर कहती हूं कि आप इस देश के सबसे फेल्ड फॉरेन मिनिस्टर हैं। और दूसरा
The Grand Old Party on Wednesday gave a long list of what it called were failures of the diplomat turned politician.
इंडियन एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन को अपना आधा एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन पूरा हो चुका है। इंडिया में यूएस का एम्बेसडर नहीं है। श्रीलंका में चीनी इंटरफेरेंस है। भूटान हमसे दूर हो गया है। बांग्लादेश ने चीन को कॉक्स बाजार में सबमरीन बेस बनाने को कह दिया है। बांग्लादेश आज हमसे इकोनॉमिक पैरामीटर्स में बेटर कर रहा है, चाहे वो पर कैपिटा इनकम हो या जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट हो।
The blistering face-off comes in the backdrop of Rahul Gandhi questioning Jaishankar's understanding of geopolitics.
तो समझना चाहिए, उनकी बयानबाजी आती रहती है, मैं देखता हूँ एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स मिनिस्टर बोलते रहते हैं, कहना नहीं चाहिए, मगर शायद उनको थोड़ी अपनी समझ गहरी करनी चाहिए.
I'm not suggesting I'm necessarily the most knowledgeable person, but I would have a fairly good self-opinion of my understanding of what is out there.
Okay.
But if he has superior knowledge, wisdom, I'm always, as I said, for me, life is a learning process.
This isn't the first time the minister is hitting out at the opposition over foreign policy.
Not just as external. Today, you have a deployment of the Indian Army on the China border that we've never had. It's done in order to counter Chinese deployments which were scaled up massively since 2020. Now, if we were in denial, how is the army out there? Because the army didn't go there because Rahul Gandhi asked them to go. I mean, the army went there because the Prime Minister of India ordered them to go.
The charges and counter-charges on Chinese aggression, however, have not cleared the air on the extent of encroachment by the neighbour on border areas. Bureau Report, India Today.
Amid this big political face-off over China, can we step back for a moment and do a rational assessment of the Modi government's China policy? Under tough circumstances, has the government done as well as it could? Or given that this is a nationalistic government, supposedly tough on national security, has the policy been a bit of a cop-out and the government not raising its voice against China in as strong a way as it should? To discuss different aspects of the success or failure of India's China policy, I'm joined on this broadcast representing the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, its national spokesperson Sanju Verma, squaring off against her. We've got Rohan Gupta from the Congress, and I've got three voices that bring different perspectives to this conversation. Vivek Kajju is the former Secretary of the Ministry of External Affairs. Kanwal Shukla is a leading defense and strategic affairs expert, and Sushant Sareen is one of our top strategic affairs experts. So welcome to all our guests. I want to go across first and foremost to Vivek Kajju, because I have a sense of what Sanju will say, I have a sense also what Rohan Gupta will say, but let's start with the former ambassador and get his sense of whether the Modi government's China policy has been a success, has it been a failure, or given the complexity of this relationship, it's not possible to cast it into a binary?
Look, it cannot be cast in a binary. That's point one. The second point is that China constitutes India's greatest strategic challenge for the present and the foreseeable future. This is one issue on which the political class has to come together. And in such situation, while the opposition must give the government full cooperation, it is for the government to take the lead to carry the political class together. And I think this issue is, in a sense, therefore beyond politics. And at my age, I can only appeal to the political parties, all of them, please come together so that a consensus can emerge. I agree that the External Affairs Minister has time and again said very plainly that the 1990s agreements do not hold anymore, that China has not adhered to them, and that we have to craft out new policies now to confront China. Part of that process is on. Part of it is in continuation what the previous government did. But I think the challenge is so great that the strategic and the political classes must come together.
Okay, so you've set the context for this debate. Yes.
Just 1 second. What I find instead is this petty squabbling. It is pathetic. As a citizen, I can only say it is pathetic.
Okay, Rohan Gupta, Ambassador Kaju makes important points. China is not a Pakistan that you can punch and bully around. It's a country, the economy of which is 5 times our size. It's a aspiring superpower. You have to be realistic of your national power and prepare for the future. He says the process of confronting China is on. It's not a aate ko dekhte hain, aate ko marenge, and you should do more, in the way that Rahul Gandhi seems to be egging on Prime Minister Modi and the BJP government. And therefore, in the view of Ambassador Kaju, what can be done is being done. This is India's biggest strategic challenge, and therefore politics on the issue of China is best left aside. This is where there must be consensus on how to deal with our biggest enemy.
Yeah, Rahul. See, I completely agree that we have to deal with China very strategically. But for that, Rahul, you have to be honest to the country, right? You cannot be on denial mode. When the Prime Minister says that koi gussa nahi hai, don't you feel that is wrong? We know that China has entered. They have acquired 2,000 square kilometers of our land. So we cannot be on denial mode. If you want support of opposition, can you go with the support of opposition with the wrong feedback to the country? No. We understand China is a big challenge. We cannot trust China. But how can you, fool around? You cannot. You have to accept the fact that yes, China has entered. 20 of our soldiers have been martyred. When you admit the facts, then you come to the opposition. Obviously, support will be there. This is the first time, Rahul, in the history that the opposition country, the China, the rival country, is using statement of our Prime Minister, that the Prime Minister of India says that nobody has entered India. Don't you feel that is wrong?
Sanju Verma, the Congress's argument is, yes, it's a complex relationship, but this government is not being truthful. The fact that there is a massive border confrontation and that China is in places it shouldn't be is implicit in what the MEA or the External Affairs Minister says. It's never publicly admitted. As far as the public pronouncements of the BJP are concerned, the Prime Minister nonetheless has said that no one has entered our territory, and therefore that's something the Chinese Foreign Affairs Ministry is quoting back at us, that you aren't being truthful, you aren't being honest. The problem is much bigger. You know the problem is bigger, but because you want to convey this sense of nationalism and masculinity, therefore you don't want to accept that there is a problem, and that's what the Congress is opposing.
My God, Rahul Kanwal, since when have you started asking questions which are so lengthy? You need to give me some time to respond to that rather verbose question of yours. It seemed more like, you were seconding what the Congress is saying.
I'm asking you a question. Okay, I'm asking you a question. Okay. Let's get to it.
Yes, so now don't interject me. You've asked me such a lengthy, long-worded question. You should have the patience to now listen to what I have to say. Thank you. Point number 1. I think this government has not beaten around the bush. It has called a spade a spade. And I think the External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, in clearly no uncertain terms, without any whataboutery, any filibustering of any kind whatsoever, has clearly said, CHINA, why are you blaming the Modi government in 2023 for a bridge that was illegally constructed by the Chinese over Pangong Lake way back in 1962? Point number 1. Point number 2. This whole narrative that, the EAM said China is a much bigger economy, so we need to be cautious. No. What he said was, and which is a thing that he's repeated in the last couple of years. He said this in 2021 also at a conclave. In 1987, Rahul, the Chinese and Indian economies were exactly equal in terms of size, in terms of nominal GDP. In fact, in 1987, we were slightly ahead of China in terms of per capita GDP. But since 1988, when Rajiv Gandhi made that visit to China till 2013, my simple question is, China grew at 10% compounded. What happened to India? For the longest time between 1988 and 2013, it is the Congress regime which has ruled this country. So they have a lot of questions that need to be answered from their end rather than indulging in a shoot and scoot politics. And I'll just tell you one last thing. This whole thing about trade deficit comes up. Oh, look, $73 billion is the trade deficit between India and China under the Modi government, and they say that, we are reducing our dependence on Chinese imports. Please look at numbers in their context. When Atal Bihari Vajpayee remitted office and the Congress took over in 2004, our trade deficit with China was $1.4 billion, and these numbers are out in the public domain. I'm not doffing them off my hat.
Okay.
And from $1.4 billion, when the Modi government took over from the Congress-led UPA in 2014, the number had skyrocketed to $36 billion. So in the 10 years of Congress-led UPA, the trade deficit of India with China increased by 3,414.
And the fact also is that the trend continues. Sanju Verma, but the trend continues. As the data on our screen suggests, the trade deficit, even on your watch, yes, percentage.
In the trade deficit.
But now I'm going to go across to Colonel Ajay Shukla. Now, here is the reality of what Vivek Kajju is saying. It's a complex situation. This is not where you can just stand up, beat your chest and say, come China, I'm going to punch you down, the PLA or Xi Jinping, in the way that you would do with a country which is a basket case, right? You have to respect the adversary and its strength. And given what can be done, the Modi government is building infrastructure. They're trying to ensure that India is better armed, that you've got drones, the kind of modern warfare capacities that India can build relative to its GDP. Whatever can be done is being done. This is not where you get publicly competitive about China. Colonel Shukla.
Well, I think that one first point that I would like to make is to counter Vivek Kajju. He's someone I have great respect for and I sort of value his views, but I don't think he is right in saying that we can only deal with this problem if we have a political consensus on dealing with it. I think that politics will continue. Politics has to continue domestically, and there is no sort of compulsion on the Congress or the other opposition parties to support the BJP if they think that the BJP is not doing right. So the question then comes in is about how the BJP is handling it, and it seems to me that this statement that we are facing an insurmountable problem in dealing with China because China is not Pakistan. It seems to me that this statement degrades India to the level of Pakistan and seems to say that anything that China does or that we have to counter against China is not within our means. I entirely disagree with that. I think they are right in saying Pakistan and China are two different countries, but in saying that we cannot deal with China the way we deal with Pakistan, that person implicitly accepts defeat at the hands of China. We will have to deal with China. We will have to deal with China on the trade front. We will have to deal with China on the military front. And we will have to deal with China on the geopolitical and strategic front. And we are fully capable of doing so. We seem to have forgotten that the Indian army, after having initially been taken by surprise in 2020, reinforced its forces in Ladakh. It has stood up to the Chinese. It has halted them over there. It has lost territory for sure. But that is something that we will have to deal with, and if possible, remedy, and if not possible, impose a cost on China for having done so. But I will only sort of conclude by saying that this defeatist attitude that seems to have pervaded the strategic community about China is completely misplaced. India has pivoted to the north. It has taken troops out of the Pakistan frontier and put them on the China border, and we will do what it takes.
But by your own admission, whatever can be done is being done in terms of moving troops, deploying them on the ground, eyeball to eyeball with the PLA on the LAC, like is the case on the line of actual control. All that's not happening is public pronouncements which say, dekhte ko dekhte, aise karenge, aankh phad denge, etc., which you don't do with a country like China. So whatever can be done militarily, you yourself, while criticizing what the government is doing, are accepting is being done.
Yes, I absolutely am accepting that what is needed to be done is being done. I would find sort of flaws and mistakes in the method of doing so, but so too would any strategic analyst in the circumstances. But what I find objectionable and what I find completely sort of to be avoided is these public statements that seem to accept and and to sort of say that yes, China is a more powerful country than us, and we will have to accept Chinese hegemony in some way or the other. That is not the case. I will never accept that.
So your most powerful argument, Sushant Sarin, is on the issue of imposing costs. That while India is doing what it can and it must, it hasn't sought to publicly impose costs of the kind, for example, when Pakistan-based terrorists sneaked into our territory, they carried out terror attacks in Uri, Pathankot, we very clearly said there will be costs. Here we're doing what we can, mostly as a defensive mechanism. We're not publicly communicating strength, which to the likes of Ajay Shukla suggests strategic defeatism.
I don't think Ajay Shukla is saying that there's any kind of strategic defeatism. I think he's counseling against saying anything which smacks of defeatism. Although I'm a little, I'm wondering where exactly anybody has said that, China is an insurmountable problem and that we have to, keep our heads low and, walk with our heads bended and before the Chinese on our knees. I don't think, unless of course Ajay is, taking something off from Dr. Jaishankar's interview yesterday, in which also I think he could have put it better. He could have, because in my view, whether it is Pakistan or it is China, I don't think we should be interested in any kind of a conflict, unless of course a conflict is foisted on us. And if, for example, the Chinese are going to foist a conflict on us, then our preparations are, to the best of our ability, we are doing it. Again, I agree with Ajay that, one could have some carping sounds to make on whether something should be done or something should not be done, but that's at a different level. But I think what is important, Rahul, is how do you define success when you are talking about dealing with China? I don't think there's any one clear definition, unless, of course, you say that, look, diplomatically, we've sorted out all our issues, the boundary question has been sorted out, etc., etc. But I don't think anybody can really say that this is the only definition of success. In my book, it's a bad situation. It's a very tense situation which we have with China. And what we are doing, both in terms of deployment, in terms of infrastructure development, is one side of it. On the economy, I agree that there is a lot more that needs to be done, but a lot has already started happening. Just today, for example, the news that, once again, we have gotten into the manufacture of APIs on the pharmaceutical sector. Not all of them, but a substantial number of them. Similarly, in terms of, trying to attract manufacturing back into India, trying to clear the ground for manufacturers to come into India, a lot more needs to be done, but a lot has been done. And clearly the numbers are suggesting that that is happening. Can you decouple from China overnight? I don't think you can. Should you try and decouple from China? Of course you should. Can everything which you are importing from China, and there are government studies, can be imported at a cheaper cost from elsewhere? Then why should the government not be focusing on
so your argument is that decoupling is a long-term process. It can't be done immediately, whether it is the manufacturing of APIs in the pharmaceutical sector or building up domestic manufacturing capacities. Rohan Gupta, that process is underway. So economically and militarily, in the way that you can untangle your relationship from China. The direction has been set very clearly, and that's the direction which the government is doing. It's not something that can happen immediately, whether it is the US, which has a worse relationship than we do. It is about containment, it is about management of China. It isn't about open confrontation. You have to do what you have to, and yet you have to contain and deal with them.
I think, Rahul, it's a case of too little, too less, and too late again. Because if you see the way China entered our borders, when our 20 soldiers were martyred, this government didn't accept that this has happened. My point, again, I am coming to the main point that yes, we have to admit that there is an issue. If you don't admit there is an issue, you cannot find solution. You cannot get cooperation of others, number one. After Galwan happened, there has been increase in imports by 45%. If the direction was set by government, assuming that they are late or they got up when Galwan happened, even after that, if that the priority was set at that point of time, increase of 45% is not normal now by any standards, by statistical standards or by a layman standard. Because this government was busy managing media in India, that priority was never to counter China strongly.
What is this?
They are, like today also, Newstrack planes. Or don't speak in between, Miss Sanju. I never spoke in between. Let me complete, please. I also can shout like you, plus we don't speak in between. 2,000 square kilometers of our land is still occupied by China. There is no question asked. We see every day the new colonies are being created.
So here's your point. Okay, one second, Sanju Verma. Here's the point. Here's the point that Rahul Gupta is making. If the UPA were in power and territory where the Indian army had been patrolling had then been denied to India to patrol, then the BJP would have been out in the streets making a massive political ruckus. You wouldn't have then said China is tough and tricky. It's always been tough and tricky to deal with. You would have created a massive political storm and made life miserable for Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, where because now it's the BJP government in power, you're saying, "Bada tough hai, we are doing what we can, but let's not discuss it publicly." You are not accepting that there is a live problem where territory is being denied, where we're no longer able to patrol, where we've patrolled in the past.
Rahul Kanwal, again to your very, very, very verbose and lengthy question, I realized you did not heckle the Congress spokesperson even once. I hope you will extend me the courtesy without heckling me. Now listen to what I have to say. And I will put... No. Okay,
Rahul is an experienced...
Okay, let him... Rohan Gupta, let us speak. Rohan Gupta, let us speak. Sanju Verma, if you have an argument, go ahead and make it. Rohan, turn Rohan's fader down. Let Sanju complete her argument. Sanju, go on, please, quickly.
No, don't tell me quickly. I will give my arguments and I will take the time that you gave to the Congress spokesperson. Stop saying quickly. Now listen to this, and your audience needs to know. Rahul Kanwal will not decide. Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi or Rohan Gupta or even your esteemed panelists, including me, none of us will decide whether territory was, taken over by the Chinese, whether it was a mere provocation, whether there was a transgression. Be it Rajnath Singh, the defense minister, be it Amit Shah, the home minister, be it Mr. Jaishankar, the external affairs minister. They clearly said that there were provocations. They said this during Galwan. They said this recently during the Tawang sector provocation. But territory has not been taken, point number one. Point number two, how much information the government decides to put out in the public domain in interests of national security is the Modi government's prerogative as per the National Security Act, which was framed by Indira Gandhi and signed by Neelam Sanjeeva Reddy. Then, point number three, Rahul, can I make my point?
Complete, please.
Point number three. You know, one thing which nobody seems to be talking of is the fact that China has a border which it shares with over a dozen nations and has a dispute with over 24 nations. For the first time in recent history, in February 2021, thanks to Narendra Modi's diplomacy, call it soft power, call it masculinity, whatever you will, China was forced to voluntarily disengage to Finger 8. Its position at Finger 8 near Pangong So, and we disengaged to our original position near the Dhan Singh Tapa outpost. Show me one government in post-independent India which forced the Chinese.
Okay, so let me put that question to Colonel Ajay Shukla. Now, India has been ceding territory, unfortunately, to China since 1962 and before. The difference now is, unlike the likes of A.K. Antony, who as defense minister said, we don't want to build too much infrastructure near the border because it makes life easier for the Chinese in case they came in, the Indian government has drawn a line and is now, to the extent that is possible, building border infrastructure, moving troops and seeking to let the Chinese know where they get off. That is, far from the defeatism that you were talking about, a big change in India's mindset. Let me just show you very briefly what A.K. Antony actually said as defense minister in Parliament.
Independent India, many years as a policy on border, best defense is not to develop the border. Undeveloped border is more safe than developed border. So many years there was no construction of roads, airfields, nothing in the border areas. By that time, China continued to develop their infrastructure in the border areas. So as a result, now they have gone ahead of us. Compared to us, infrastructure-wise, capability-wise, in the border areas, they are ahead. I admit that. It's a part of history. But
now here is A.K. Antony. On the floor of the House, Rohan Gupta actually saying we're not building infrastructure because it makes life easier for the Chinese. So when you're talking about defeatism, that to my mind is the definition of defeatism.
Rahul, if you see the Congress UPA government in 2006, there was a task force, Shyam Sharan task force, which lined up the whole policy of border infra. And under that policy only, all the roads or bridges or airport, they were built there. So that process started in 2006 after UPA government.
But Rohan, you're dodging my question. If you're saying that the government isn't doing enough and that there is defeatism, etc., what we showed your defense minister say is actually, Ajay Shukla, the definition of defeatism. That let's not build roads because the Chinese could come down those roads. That's really where, and you've been in the army, that's been the psyche of the army in some parts in terms of how they dealt with China. They weren't, unlike taking on Pakistan very directly, this was always thought to be something you didn't really want to confront, in the way that you realize now you have no option but to confront the Chinese. And in that sense, would you accept that there's been a big change between that A.K. Antony mindset to the mindset that we're seeing now?
Rahul, let's not cherry pick our facts. Let's look at the fact, not selectively, but as they actually played out. First of all, starting from the end 1990s to the early 2000s, it was not anyone else that sort of put down this clause that we should not build roads from the border because the Chinese may use it. This was what was put forward by the army. This was army policy. Antony was merely the vehicle that sort of mouthed that policy in Parliament. The army said that if we are to build more roads, we need 2 additional divisions. And listen properly because these facts are important. We need 2 additional divisions for Arunachal Pradesh. At that stage, the 2 additional divisions were sanctioned. The army changed its policy and said, do we now have enough troops to look after the border? And that was that. Then the army got up and said that we need 2 additional divisions for a mountain strike corps that would be able to strike into Pakistan. This was all coming from the army again, mind you, not from Antony's mouth. And as a result of which, we got those 2 additional divisions, which are now part of the mountain strike corps. And the sort of the force levels are now enough to sort of defend any axes that are created by the building of roads. But let's be very clear, these decisions are not made by the political masters. These decisions are made by the army, put forward to the political masters. The political masters then evaluate them, and if they feel that they are worth sort of taking or keeping, they go ahead with that. But let's not try and say that Antony on his own...
Okay, Vivek Kachur, do you want to respond to what Colonel Shukla is saying, that playing out that bite of the defense minister of the UPA era is wrong because he is merely reflecting the thinking within the defense establishment at that time, which was that we didn't have enough troops to guard the China border and therefore we shouldn't build those roads. When that thinking changed and started to change on the UPA's watch, the position on the ground and in terms of policy also change. Therefore, that bite is actually being played out of context.
I think Rahul, Ajay will agree with me that the thinking of the army, of a conservative thinking of the army on border infrastructure began from the 60s and continued for decades. It was only later that we decided to change, and when I agree with Ajay that when the army projected that they needed more soldiers, more divisions, and that was sanctioned, it was at that stage that the army said, okay, now we build infrastructure. My point is a little bit. My point is that, and this is where I think I have a little disagreement with it. My point is that with China presenting our greatest challenge, the strategic and the political classes needed to get together. Say, even on the question of the number of troops we need, the amount of money, funds that have to be spent on the LAC, the kind of infrastructure that needs to be constructed. Everyone looked at it in silos, in pieces. And that is why you have a comment like the Antony comment that you played out. So, why am I pleading today that there needs to be a consensus? I know it is difficult. I believe there are some issues, some national issues, which are beyond politics. Of course, routine politics should be played in a democracy. But there are some issues, and I think Ajay will agree with you.
No, he doesn't. He said it's the opposition's job. When the BJP is in opposition, they will do the same. He said that's what oppositions do. They challenge the government of the day, Vivek Kaju. Just because the BJP is in power, why should the opposition be told don't do politics? It's their job to do politics.
No. Let me put it to you like this. On strategic issues, on India's strategic program, has anyone ever, has it been a matter of politics? Has our space program ever been a matter of politics? No.
Let Ajay Shukla respond to that. Colonel Shukla?
Yes. What exactly do you want me to respond to?
He says on strategic programs, there is no politics. Some issues like the nuclear program, etc., should really be above politics.
And they have been above politics.
Let me respond to that. Again, we need to see this in the right context. When we say that these issues are beyond politics, it means that we assume that the government has sat down with the opposition parties, held a discussion, debated the matter thoroughly to and fro, and then arrived at a common consensus. It doesn't mean that the Prime Minister of the day gets up, implements any policy he likes, and then when he's criticized, he turns around and says, this is beyond politics. No, this whole business of discussing, of arriving at a consensus, of arriving at a common course of action that all parties can support given their constituencies, this is what we need to do. This is not being done.
Vivek Kaju, you can't decide that this is the policy and then say everyone fall in line. There was no deliberation. It's not like the Congress and the other parties were called in and then the policy emerged from that conversation which cut across the political spectrum.
Look, there was a time, Rahul, and I know of that time, when quietly the main political leaders of different parties, both of the ruling party and of the opposition, had trusted people who consulted among themselves. And the politics was one thing that will take place. But on these issues, there was this process of consultation and common views emerged. And they were then reflected, and I agree with Ajay, that it is not a case of the government standing up and everyone following. No. This is what I'm pleading for. That the government and the opposition should come together, no point scoring.
Okay, let Sanju Verma respond.
But come together and decide.
That the government decides the policy unilaterally. It's not as if the opposition is brought on board as part of a conversation. And then you can't say that everybody must agree with the policy because that policy never had all-party consensus.
Okay. Rahul, I think both Mr. Kaju and Ajay Shukla made some very interesting points. I have this to say. I saw that interview of ex-Air Chief Marshal Fali Homi Major with your colleague Shiv Arur a couple of months back. and Fali Homi Major clearly said that the Indian Air Force was well equipped to take on Pakistan and the Lashkar-e-Toiba, the perpetrators behind the horrific Mumbai 26/11 terror attack. But the then political establishment of Sonia Gandhi / Manmohan Singh refused to give the green signal to go ahead and make the necessary incursions and avenge the 26/11 attack. So the political establishment refused to take a call despite the defense establishment willing to do so. Point number one. Point number two, if you're saying that it is the defense establishment which takes the call, then please tell me that why is it that repeatedly under the Congress dispensations, we've never seen decisive action, but under the BJP, as Mr. Jaishankar said, who sent our troops to the LAC? It was because you have a strong political establishment under Narendra Modi. Had it been Manmohan Singh, our defense establishment would still be twiddling their thumbs like they did during 26/11. Then Manmohan Singh was
Sushant
absolutely quiet and
Sareen, do you
refused to
buy
give the
that
green
argument
signal.
that because this was the Modi government, the response to Galwan and after that has been far more muscular than could have been expected under the UPA? Or do you think the UPA, given that this was a matter of national security, would more or less have done the same thing?
Rahul, if you look at what happened, for example, in Eastern Ladakh under the UPA, I don't think the UPA reacted in a similar, for want of a better word, belligerent manner. And I think the kind of deployments that have been done this time around, I'm not sure if there's any parallel to that in the last many years, many decades, in fact. There have been a few skirmishes under the old Congress government, but that is a different Congress party. Both in Sikkim as well as in Arunachal. There have been those episodes as well. But I think the kind of deployments that have been carried out, that's a new, number one. Number two, where I disagree with Ambassador Karju is, look, you have to reconcile yourself to the way politics will be carried out in this country. Number one, no matter who comes, it was the same BJP government which was carping over the nuclear deal, right? Did they overturn the deal when they came into power? I think what we have to recognize is that on matters of national security, there is an implicit consensus in this country. I don't think the Chinese, the Congress party say that the Chinese are great friends of India and we should, actually lean forward to shake hands with the Chinese. I don't think the BJP is going to say the same thing. I don't think the Congress party is going to say that, okay, fine, let's undo Article 370 and hand over Kashmir to Pakistan. I don't think they're going to do that. They will make their noises for whatever, constituency they want to address. But when they are in power, there will be a continuity in the policies of the government with, of course, some minor changes here and there. That is the consensus which will always be there.
Okay.
Now, if that consensus breaks down, I don't know. But from my perspective, I see that consensus. Whatever the BJP government right now is doing, if Congress was to come back into power tomorrow, they would continue. They're not going to say that, okay, fine, we are going to pull back the deployments along Eastern Ladakh. They're not going to say that. They might even double down on those deployments. So whatever carping sounds they're making right now, that's politics and you should ignore it.
The job of the opposition is to oppose. And what they're opposing depends on where they're sitting. Where they're sitting. I'm out of time, Sanju. I'm out of time.
Can I take 10 seconds?
Yes, Sanju, go for it. Okay, 10 seconds.
Okay. Just 10 seconds. I want to tell your audience that the DS BDO road was started during Atal Bihari Vajpayee's leadership in 2000.
Anybody entered our territory or no?
And why did Manmohan Singh and Sonia Gandhi stop construction of the DS BDO road?
Can you just tell
why
the
was
audience?
DS BDO road construction stopped by Manmohan Singh and Sonia
Stop your
Gandhi?
marketing. Accept the truth that this government has miserably failed.
I think they've just proven the point that Sushant Sareen was trying to make, which is that opposition parties and government will do this. Politics is just part of being a noisy democracy. But the interesting thing about this conversation was you heard different shades of opinion. Are we doing enough strategically in terms of safeguarding our national security, also sending a tough message to China? You heard different views as always on the Newstrack. I don't tell you what to think. You hear different points of view and you decide which argument you thought carried the day and carries the most weight. For the time being, Vivek Karju, Colonel Shukla, Sushant Sareen, Sanju Verma, Rohan Gupta for joining me on the Newstrack. Thank you very much. I'm slipping into a break. When I come back, trouble mounts for Delhi Deputy Chief Minister Manish Sisodia. Centre gives nod to prosecute Sisodia in the Snoopgate case. Details coming up on the other side.
Over 3 decades, Business Today has delivered news, views and analysis like no other, chronicling India Inc.'s journey through time. Now, at 31 years, Business Today presents the future. Mission 2047, Road to India at 100. With Indian industry's biggest stalwarts and an exclusive interview with Google CEO Sundar Pichai.
Destruction, death, but also hope and survivors. Rescue teams have saved numerous lives, in some cases absolute miracle stories of people being pulled out days after being buried under the rubble. And now here's a heartbreaking video from Hatay in Turkey that's being shared worldwide. Volunteers have now attached red balloons over the rubble as a gesture of paying tribute to all those who've died. The red balloons, seen attached to various metal wires and debris, is in memory of some of the child victims in the quake. One of the volunteers named this initiative as My Last Present to Children.
Çocuklara son hediyem olmasını istedim.
Every time we tie a balloon, my heart hurts. We have tied 1,000 to 1,500 balloons so far, but we will hopefully continue until we reach all parts of the city, until we reach every home of the children who lost their lives.
İnanın kalbim o kadar acıyor.
The number of red balloons floating over the rubble shows the heartbreaking reality of how many children's lives were cut so brutally short by this calamity. Nearly 2 weeks after this disaster struck, many still are hoping against hope that their loved ones can be still pulled out alive. With Aishwarya Radhakrishnan, Bureau Report, India Today.
You're on board the Newstrack. The EAM Aadmi Party may have won the mayoral dangal, but there's more trouble brewing for one of its top netas. The Ministry of Home Affairs has given its nod to prosecute Manish Sisodia. The Delhi Deputy Chief Minister is accused of heading the feedback unit that allegedly spied on political opponents.
Yet another setback for Arvind Kejriwal. His most trusted lieutenant in the Delhi government and the EAM Aadmi Party, Manish Sisodia, is again on the radar of the central investigative agencies. The Ministry of Home Affairs has sanctioned to prosecute Deputy Chief Minister Sisodia in an alleged snooping case after a CBI request was approved by Delhi LG VK Saxena. The CBI sought sanctions to register an FIR against Sisodia, who heads the Vigilance Department of the Delhi government. The The feedback unit was created under this department in 2015 after Aam Aadmi Party came to power in Delhi. The Deputy Chief Minister is accused of running the feedback unit to snoop on the opposition. Aam Aadmi leaders are also accused of siphoning government funds for the spying mission. Sisodia has called the case against him false and asserted that it is a sign of BJP's weakness. Taking a jibe at the Saffron Party, he said Aam Aadmi Party's growth is unnerving the BJP.
पेगासस किसने खरीदा था? केंद्र सरकार ने खरीदा था। वहाँ बताए केंद्र सरकार की वो जजों की, पत्रकारों की, राजनेताओं की जासूसी क्यों करा रही थी? केंद्र सरकार को बताना पड़ेगा।
जो 700 लोगों की जासूसी कर रहे हैं, गोपनीय डेटा इकट्ठा करके पता नहीं किसको किसको शेयर कर रहे हैं, तो ऐसा अपराध करने वालों को सजा तो होनी चाहिए। हम कह रहे हैं कि जांच कड़ी हो और अगर दोषी हैं तो चाहे वो कोई भी हो, अरविंद केजरीवाल जी क्यों ना हो या कोई मनोज तिवारी क्यों ना हो, जो दोषी है उसको सजा होनी चाहिए।
In the last 8 years, with all their agencies, has the Bharatiya Janata Party been able to present even evidence of 1 rupee of corruption by Aam Aadmi Party? Of course they haven't. They have not been able to present evidence of corruption in 200 cases, so it is very clear even in the 201st, nothing is going to be there.
They have always played the victimhood card. This victimhood card won't do. They must come and answer the questions because the victimhood card has proven to be a fake card. None of the cases have been quashed by the courts of law, and today they must answer the questions that are being posed to them, not try to run away from them.
First liquor policy and now Snoopgate. The cup of vows for Sisodia only seems to be spilling over. With Ram Koinkar and Amit Bhardwaj in New Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
This is where I wrap up the Newstrack tonight. For your time and your trust, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you at 8 p.m. tomorrow evening. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye, good night.
Ranbir Kapoor is currently gearing up for the release of his upcoming film, Tu Jhooti Main Makkar. Recently, the actor was spotted heading out of Mumbai when a paparazzi danced to the tune of a song from his next and left the actor impressed. The songs Tere Pyar Mein and Pyar Hota Kai Baar Hai from this Love Ranjan's romantic movie have become huge hits. Co-starring Shraddha Kapoor, Tu Jhooti Main Makkar is set to release on March 8th. The film also stars comedian Anubhav Singh Bassi and Dimple Kapadia.
नमस्ते पंडित जी, कुंडलियां मिलवानी थी।
अभी जल्दी क्या है? बुरा बन के ब्रेकअप तो कोई भी कर सकता है। खूबसूरत ब्रेकअप वो होता है जिसमें सामने वाले को, उसके घर वालों को, रिश्तेदारों को, सबको लगे कि लड़की तो बहुत प्यारी है, हमारे लड़के में ही खोट है।
रोक तो ले भाई, क्या कर रहा है? एक बार तो रोक। मुझे उद्देश्य नहीं दिखा।